Hi there, I'm Construction Gamer, and this is a Transport Fever 2 speed experiment. Now this is a question that I've been pondering for quite some time, ever since I learned about the destination system that the Transport Fever 2 would have. I've basically wondered how far people are physically willing to travel and at what point they stop travelling to certain destinations in another town. So the question itself is relatively simple, but to get a satisfactory answer has taken a bit of playing around. So I've built 16 towns in total to experiment with a whole variety of different scenarios in the sort of vein as Gaming Authoritar. I'm not sure if anyone remembers him. He was really good at doing these sort of experiments with Transport Fever 1, but it doesn't seem to have made any videos recently, so I thought I would kind of pick up the baton and try and do this experiment. I know we're a year into the game being released now, but I wanted an answer to this, and I think I've got one. Hopefully. What I've done is I've got a huge map, so I think it's an experimental size, and I've just laid out basically 8 towns on one side. It started off as 4 because I was just going to experiment with trains, but it's gone to 8 at each side. And so what I've done is you've got them here all nicely laid out. They were all started at huge, all had a target population of 300. Now I'm not hugely interested in the target population because that is all percentage based, but what I wanted to know was basically how far people are willing to travel, or what speed they're willing to travel. It's a bit of a complicated question when you kind of break it down, but what I'm going to do anyway, so we've got these, and you can see here I've got the speeds. I've done it in kilometers per hour, so it's a bit more accurate, but it doesn't really matter too much. And then I've got what I started with was trains, and then I thought, no, let's add. Well, no, what I thought was let's do trains. Let's see how slow a train can go before people will stop travelling. So I went as slow as a vanilla train here, which is capable of 78 miles per hour, 125 kilometers per hour, and people are still using it. It's not making any money, but people are using it, and this map is absolutely enormous. You can see I'll start at the top and I'll work my way down. So it's a 1x4 huge map, so that the distances across the map are absolutely enormous, but in terms of the game anyway. You can see the tracks coming down here, and then you've got these. I'm not going to bother with these are just a destination to reach. What I wanted to do, I just wanted what I've done actually before I go any further, to try and remove all of the different elements that might sway the number of destinations. I've tried to compact the town as much as possible, so I've done a lot of road work. Each of the stations is identical almost, so they've got 3 points of access, and they've got compact all around the station. So if you click on the station itself, you know, they should all be able to walk to the station. Haven't put any buses in because again that could sway the decision, the outcome either way. The length of the track is slightly different, but it doesn't make a huge difference to the actual journey time because it's so enormous. So you can see there they all look relatively similar shape. I've tried to put that in place here as well. I've even, because these were a bit close together, I've put a road, and then I've taken ownership of that so they can't interact with each other, so there's no actual private transport from town to town, only within the town itself. So I tried to eliminate all of the variables, and this is what I've come up with. You can see here I've got a bus, a road one here with a bus and a plane as well, which is being crowded, and that is because of the capacities, but the actual trains themselves all seem to be relatively good. As the actual service, what's the word, the quality, is it? Yeah, all the station qualities are very good, I think. I'll just double check. I'm going to bring all of these up in a minute. Why are your emissions? I mean, I know it's an old train, but yeah, let's just ignore that because we're worried about the destinations anyway. But hopefully these should all be very good. I've tried to keep all the capacities of the trains and everything the same. Obviously can't keep the capacity of the plane, so what I've done is I've just put a single vehicle on this, so with all relatively similar capacities. I mean, it's 114, so it's a bit low, but 168 and 200, so it's not wildly out, and you can see there they're not full anyway, so we're not leaving people behind, which is the main thing. So that's one variable eliminated. Now this bus here is an electric bus, so I've used electric buses to keep the emissions down, just so we're not really losing any growth potential which could harm the overall figure that we're looking for, which without further ado we will take a look at. So this is the slowest This is the slowest train, 125 kilometers per hour. Destination's 110. How many people are waiting doesn't really matter. Sandhurst 160 kilometers per hour, and then we've got 164 kilometers per hour here, so 110 miles per hour, 100 miles per hour for that one. And then we've got the 125, 200 kilometers per hour, and 224, so 140 miles per hour, and then 300 kilometers per hour, which is the highest speed without mods, is 186 miles per hour. Now there are a few discrepancies which I can only put down to slow town growth at the other end, but you will see there is the actual target population. They've all got a target population of 50, apart from Bude Stratton, which has a target of, which would actually have a target of 60, but we do have some poor emissions there, which I'm not entirely sure. I know it's a high-speed train, but they are all new with 50% markup on the maintenance value, so maybe they just don't like high-speed trains, but I don't think there's very much I can do about that. But you will see, anyway, the important figure I think, anyway, for this sort of metric is the destinations that people are willing to travel to by public transport. So they only have one means of public transport, and that is the train between the two towns, so they're not connected anywhere else. So you see 110, 135, 145, and then this one's a bit of a discrepancy with this one, 135, but then it does go up again, 202 and 363. But I think if we take all of these away and we look at the huge, like the big differences, so we've got 125 kilometers per hour, 110 destinations, and then 300 kilometers per hour, 363 destinations. So at a certain speed it does start to impact how far and how many people are willing to travel. So I think that almost sort of answers the question, but what I wanted to know is how slow do you have to go before people will stop travelling? Now we're on 1 game speed. I don't know how, in terms of how long it takes or what the journey time that people are willing to travel, but we have here, I've put an electric bus on. We have a bus station which has a relatively good, but if we click on here you'll see no destinations. Now the bus is travelling 69 kilometers per hour, which is pretty slow, but it is the fastest electric bus because I just wanted to take out any of the sound, the emissions. Basically I wanted to keep the emissions as low as possible, so the bus is pretty slow at 69 kilometers per hour. But what I was thinking now, what we can look at is the rate. So let's look, so ignore those because they're just shuttles between the airport, which we'll talk about in a minute, but we've got a rate here of 113 for the high speed, and it should relatively correlate, but not quite because of the difference in capacities. But having said that, it does actually so we've got a frequency of 19 minutes with a rate of 113, frequency of 23, 25, 28, so there is a nice kind of correlation there between the speed. It is obvious anyway, but there's a nice correlation there between the speed, so that's quite a big difference, and you can see that affects the rate. Now the XE bus that I've put, the electric bus, has a rate of 3, which is rubbish. Now what I'm going to do before we talk about the airport, which has a rate of 28, which again is poor, but that's because of the capacity, I'm going to put on some more electric buses, and what I want to do is see if I'm going to put on 4, I'm going to have 50% maintenance, and they're going to go on that route there, and then I'm going to, once these have kind of got to their destinations, I'm going to put another 4, and then I'm going to wait about real time half an hour or 20 minutes, and then see if increasing the rate has actually done anything. So we've started with the bus destinations reachable of 0, so that means nobody is willing to travel from Fleet down towards the other destination at the other end. So we're going to increase the rate and see if that actually makes people want to travel further. Okie dokie, so I've upped the frequency of the bus service. We now have a rate of 27, it was at 3 before we started out. Interestingly, people are using it. 4 people are on all 9 of the buses, so yeah, it's not being particularly well used. And if we actually look at the important figure, I think, which is the destinations, nobody is willing to travel on the bus no matter what the frequency. Judging by this, I mean, I could increase the frequency, but I think there is a limit to just how long rather than how far the journey is, so if that makes any sense. So basically all the journeys are the same. It is a very long journey on a 1x4 map, which is huge as well. So if we look at this, look at the train 125 kilometers per hour. I've just timed it at 3 times speed, 3 times game speed in real world, and it took 4 minutes 40 seconds for the train to get from Claycross down to the bottom of the map. So that's, it's a pretty long journey, especially at 3 times game speed. Now I measured the journey time of the bus as well, and if we look at this, in 0 destinations, that took 8 minutes 30 seconds at 3 times game speed to get from the top to the bottom. So there must be a threshold between 8 minutes 30 and 4 minutes 40. I know that's quite a big difference at 3 times game speed, at which people will just stop using public transport to get to where they want to go. So it's not a case of how far they're willing to travel, it's a case of how long they're willing to travel. So I hope that gives some sort of kind of answer to the question that I really originally posed. But what I just want to do is, if I get rid of the buses, so if we look back here, we look at the actual frequency it's telling us on here, which is 8-minute frequency. If I get rid of all the buses, we should give us a little bit of a better metric, I think. So get rid of all of those, give it a couple of seconds at times 3, and then it will hopefully remeasure the frequency. So does that change now? It doesn't change. So at 68-minute frequency, which doesn't really seem to tally with what I've done. So 8 minutes 30 times 3, what's that? So yeah, it's 25.5 minutes if what my measurement was correct, which I measured it with an actual stopwatch, so it doesn't really tally, I guess, the journey there and back, but that would still only be 50 odd minutes, and that's saying 68. So this is a little bit confusing, I think, the frequency measurement. I think I'd prefer to go off my actual real world kind of measurement of the time at times 3 speed. But say if we say it times 1 speed, it'd be 24 minutes to get from one end of the map to the other, and the train again, what did I say, 4 minutes 40 seconds, so that'd be 12, 13, almost 14 minutes to get from the top to the bottom at 1 times speed. So there is definitely a threshold at which people will be willing to travel, but even then, if we go back to the actual number that I wanted to kind of experiment with or find out about, is the number of destinations people are willing to travel at a given journey time. Bring these up for the last time just so we can have a good look, maybe because I have played it forward a little bit further, so maybe some of these discrepancies have evened themselves out a little bit. But if we look at everything, look at the full table, so we'll look at the bus as well and the airport, we will see that the journey time is the biggest and most important aspect of this. So if we start with the train, 125 kilometers per hour, 110 destinations that people will be willing to travel to. And then if we go to the high speed end, which is this one here, they're willing to travel to 368 destinations, which, it's not too bad, and that's given us quite a good uplift. But then this is where the frequency comes into it, because the airport only has a capacity, the aircraft only has a capacity of 33, so the actual rate is very, very poor. So considering that, we are still getting 275 destinations reachable, but obviously that's going to be going up and down because the quality of the service is mediocre, so that holds back the town growth at the other end and the town growth at this end as well. So speed is important, but as is frequency. But I think in conclusion, I would say that speed is more important than frequency. We can see here even after 20 minutes, half an hour, even before I deleted all the buses, this was saying 0 destinations. Even though there were 4 people who chose to use the bus, the journey time of, the journey time of 8 minutes 30 seconds at 3 times game speed was just too long for the Sims to cope with on the citizens. So I hope that's given a bit of a conclusive outcome, bit of a good conclusive conclusion, and it's something which you can kind of base future construction. So if you can connect 2 towns which are the opposite ends of a 1x4 map, but they will have to be a reasonable speed. Now let's take a look at this. I'm quite surprised by this actually, the balances. So the high speed train is actually making money. It is full all the time as well, which is good. And then we'll go back down to the next one actually, which is 224 kilometers, 140 miles per hour. Still making a good profit, got a good loading factor. And then if we go up to 200 kilometers per hour, I'd say they're about even in terms of profitability and they're exactly the same train as well. What I've done is I've used 200 kilometers per hour track for this one, for the 200 kilometers per hour one. You can see there he stood at 125 miles per hour. So I would say that there's a threshold between which people will start to travel, which is definitely above 43 miles per hour. It definitely has to be past than 69 kilometers per hour. But then if you really want to start shifting people, I mean, this is making a profit, but it's not really shifting a huge number of people. I think you do have to start to go up to, what's this, 176 kilometers per hour, 110 miles per hour for that one. But I think to really encourage people to travel, you have to be going at least 200 kilometers per hour, and then you can see you do start to get some good loading figures. And then if you really want people to travel, then 300 kilometers per hour plus, and then we get into the air where it's much faster, 600 kilometers per hour for that one, I think. Is it? Possibly. Yes, it is. But the frequency and the capacity is so, not the frequency, the rate is so low that it's putting people off travelling altogether. So yeah, frequency is important and speed are important, but I would say that speed and therefore journey time is the most important metric. Obviously, if I increase the rate for this would just take off. Excuse the pun. You know, they really would start to shift a larger number of people, and people would be willing to travel quite far. So there we are. I will leave you with all those figures. I know it's a bit overwhelming, but hopefully it gives you a nice breakdown, especially with the speed as well, of just what it takes for people to start moving and how many destinations are reachable for a huge town. All the same, you see the target populations there, and there we go with the airport there and the bus at the very end, where they just refuse to travel even with an increased frequency that we put on there. So I hope I explained it roughly. I think I've answered my own question about how far people are willing to travel, or at least at what time the journey time should be before they'll stop travelling altogether. So I'm going to leave it there for today and say until next time, bye bye.